If you compare beer with bratwurst,
and cheese with wine,
or even whiskey
with donuts,
then we think you can pair all of these delicious drinks with
murder,
conspiracies,
missing persons,
and more.
Drink with us as you feed your craving for true crime and creepy stories.
Hello, hello, hello. Here we are again. If you haven't listened to our podcast, here's a real quick snippet of what we do. My beautiful wife over here, Katie, she tells me, Jason, a story about it's going to be true crime or conspiracy or something, along those lines, wherever our rabbit holes end up leading. And sometimes we take requests and we just have a good time. But what makes us, I guess, a little different is that she gives me, the contributor, just a couple notes about the story, and I go out and find something, a libation that we can pair with that story, and we drink while we're talking about it, and it's a good, fun time. And sometimes that leads to, words being mixed up, names changing, and it's a lot of fun. So please enjoy. We hope you enjoy listening to us get a little knackered and learn something new from the perspective that Katie is going to tell us. Will you let us know a little bit about what you're going to tell us in this episode?
So as Brian and Annette Swanson slept soundly in their Marshall, Minnesota home, a call would wake them from their sleep at 1:54 a.m. on May 14th, 2008. On the other end of the line was their adult son, Brandon, who needed a ride. The early morning would usher in a nightmare that they have yet to wake from. You see, despite staying on the line with their son and traveling to the exact location he reported to being, Brian and Annette Swanson would never find Brandon. And the mystery that remains after his disappearance so many, many years later is still as perplexing today as it was in 2008.
All right. Well, got another missing persons case. This will be interesting. I'm very interested to see what you have to say on this story and uncovering the different details that you have for us. But you didn't give me much except that It's a missing person and it takes place in Minnesota and it's college age kid.
Yes.
I looked into things. I scratched off college age kid, and I almost
because they drink whatever is given them.
Yeah. There's
we
actually
could have done some like Busch Light or
I was like, there's got to be a Minnesota
cheap wine,
cheap beer, or where there has to be one from there. But I decided to do a little research, see what maybe distilleries there are in Minnesota. We don't hear of much around here. In my section, which if you have listened to us, you know that my section of knowledge is mostly just whiskey and bourbon of all whiskeys.
I told him next week he cannot do another brown liquor. He can't do it.
We'll see. I tried to bring something really different for you because I found a few very highly recommended, and these were highly recommended over other liquors from there as well. Minnesota just doesn't have a whole lot, and that kind of makes sense. We think Colorado is temperamental in weather.
Yeah.
Minnesota is like another beast. I mean, it's basically Canada. It's the far north. And that's actually the one I wanted to find. It was one from a distillery called Far North. So one day we will have that on because it sounds really delicious.
Note to self.
Yeah. I looked for it. The store said they had it. There was like 5 of us looking and we couldn't find it. But I did find another one that was highly recommended. This one's called Keeper's Heart. But that's the distillery, the whiskey maker that makes it. Keeper's Heart. It's got a really cool cover. You can see that.
I like it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. This one, so they mainly make their main thing is Irish whiskey, which is kind of funny, Irish whiskey from Minnesota. But this one stood out to me as like, I know you're not a crazy fan of the Browns.
Well, don't
whiskey.
say that.
Whiskey.
My husband is a shade
married
of
one.
So are my children.
Liquors, brown liquors. But this one is interesting because it's Irish whiskey and bourbon whiskey.
Well, I would just like to try it because I don't understand like any of it at this point in time. I have 1 foot in St. Patrick's Day, and the fact that it's a grain, I'm just like, what? It's not Irish.
Well, but 1 foot in St. Patrick's Day.
Is Jameson an Irish whiskey?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm back in. I'm understanding now. I'm following.
All right. So I'm just going to give a little tidbit about this. They actually sum it up pretty nicely on the bottle. We'll be the judge of that once we actually taste it. But this bottle here, the characteristic sweet taste of bourbon intertwined with notes of freshly charred virgin oak pair beautifully with the earthy spices of the single Irish pot still whiskey and the delicate butterscotch sweetness from the Irish grain whiskey to deliver a unique tasting experience.
And
so you've got kind
earthy spiced virgin for a unique tasting experience. Is that what that says?
In a nutshell.
All right.
Yep. Virgin oaks, charred virgin, burning virgins and spicy Irishmen.
We're trying to liven this up because the story should be quick and straightforward.
All right. So I'm going to pour a couple of these for us and let's see what this tastes like. Okay. Here's yours, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Might be a little watered down, but that's
how I like it. Smells like what I think it should smell like. Okay. It's got some power behind it. It definitely is like a mature man's beverage.
Yeah.
Because I've had some Jameson in the last week.
Yeah.
Because of St. Patty's, and this definitely is like an elevated version. Like somebody put their cigar in a Jameson and swiveled it around a bit.
No, that's a great description. Yeah.
You're just like, I don't know if I like it, but I also know I don't hate it. So
it almost elevates a Jameson into like a fine Scotch. And I'm not a Scotch connoisseur, so please forgive me. I don't mean fine, just a Scotch, because it's got the cigar something that reminds you.
Yes,
I should have a cigar with this because for some reason what I'm tasting reminds me of a cigar.
It makes me want to like this kind of beverage.
It makes me want
a challenge.
Like, I feel like this podcast, when we're doing a drink like this, we need to be in like big brown leather chairs.
Yes.
In an like oak finished room with fine leather bound books all around us. And smoking on some stogies. Yeah.
No, it's not my favorite. And anybody who has listened to any episode where we drank brown liquors, it's just not my favorite. I would pretend to like this for my street cred. And that's about all. It tastes like a rich man put a cigar in my drink, and I will drink it for my street cred. That's how I would describe it.
Look, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of like it. I've had scotches that I really like. I got into whiskey because of scotch. Bounced over to bourbon. Once I really dove into bourbon, there was something about scotches I wasn't crazy about. This is like a scotch without the peatiness. So peatiness.
That is not what you said.
Scotch without the penis.
Do they come with those? Because I've never had one.
You got to have one to drink them, I guess. But no, it gives me what I enjoyed about a scotch, and without this taste of. I would think that algae in the bottom of like a green belt or a river or something, more of a green belt, because that's what
Mhm.
that you see, just green floors. That's what I imagine peat tastes like. And this doesn't have that. So I'm going to highly recommend this. This is one of the first like brand new,
Yes.
I've never had whiskeys where I'm like, damn, I like it. I'll recommend this. I'll drink it again. We'll see. You know, maybe I have it a couple more times. I'm like, oof, can't do it. But right now, I like it. So,
Well, an Irish bourbon from Minnesota by Keeper's Heart is perfectly paired with a story straight out of Minnesota, which should impact your heart somewhat negatively. And if it doesn't, I have a question about your humanity, because it's kind of sad.
I do have to say, I liked the name of this too, because this was a missing persons, and it's kind of
That's kind of what I was trying to go for. Just like
in a dark way, you know, a kidnapper or whoever takes
sad.
Somebody, makes them disappear. Like, you're a keeper of a heart.
Oh, you took it literally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going dark.
All right, let's just jump in.
All right.
So Brandon Victor Swanson was born on June 30th, 1989. In the spring of 2008, Brandon was a 5'6" tall, 19-year-old college student at Minnesota's Community and Technical College. To celebrate the end of the spring semester, Brandon attended 2 different parties that night. The first end-of-year celebration was near Lind, which is a town relatively close to his family home in Marshall, where he was living with his family while he attended college. Next, Brandon drove to another party in Canby, which is about 35 miles from his Marshall home. Brandon's friends would later report that he had not been drinking that much and that he did not seem intoxicated, nor did it seem like the amount he had drunk should have significantly impaired him. Despite this, when Brandon decided to call it a night a little after midnight, he chose not to take the Minnesota State Highway home, which would have been the most direct route, and instead, he chose to drive the more rural back farming roads. Now, Brandon had previously received a DWI in 2006.
May say, at that age, well, any age, I would have chose the same thing. Rural, farmland, roads over the highway.
Yes. Now, in 2006, Brandon had received a DWI, and so most likely in an effort to possibly avoid running into any law enforcement, Brandon erred on the side of caution and made his way home along those rural gravel roads.
Oh, they were gravel?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. At
some point on his drive, Brandon veered off the road and into a ditch. This ditch was on the side of a farming field, and he basically high-centered his Chevy Lumina.
That's a car, right?
It's a sedan.
Lumina. I feel like it's a small one too. I'm trying to picture it. I feel like it's a small, rounded. It's an ugly.
That's
car.
How I picture most college kid cars. So we're gonna go with that. It's cheap.
Yeah.
The insurance cost.
Well, you
is
had
low.
your. What'd you have?
I drove a Ford Aspire, which looked like a jelly bean. No, I took it to college.
Oh, you did?
After I crashed my truck.
That's what I'm imagining Luna. It's kind of like that. And I might be wrong, but that's what I'm remembering. Anyway.
Now, with his wheels elevated off the ground, unable to get traction, Brandon had no choice but to call for help. First, Brandon made calls to some friends, but when they did not answer, Brandon resorted to calling his parents. On this call, Brandon told his parents he was near Lind, which would only have been about a 10-minute drive from their home. So Brian and Annette got into their truck and headed off into the night to help their stranded son. Now, during the course of the call, the trio had worked out a plan. When Brandon's parents were close to where he had reported being, both parties, he and his parents, would flash their car's headlights like location beacons. However,
what was the reason for that? Is it because
it's pitch black? You're on a farming road. There are no lights. He's not 100% sure where he is.
I guess
he's pretty confident.
2008, you aren't just sending
a
pen. Like,
correct.
This is right.
So he's like, I think I'm on this road. If you take this road, I'll flash my lights when you get on it. You flash your lights. And when we see each other, we can say, hey, you're going the right way. Hey, I'm 20 yards from you.
This sounds like the beginning of a horror movie.
It literally sounds like one. However, as Brandon flashed his headlights at the same time that his parents did, when they believed they were somewhere within his vicinity, neither party could see flashing lights of any kind off in the darkness.
Wait, say that again?
So his parents get to where they think you should be, and they all start flashing their lights, which the fact that his car's a Lumina makes me laugh a little bit because Lumina's a play on light. You know what I mean?
No kidding, yeah.
And that didn't work. And they're flashing their lights, and they're on this call with each other, and they're getting frustrated. And that's a whole part of the story. Is his parents are like, where are you? And he goes, why don't you see me? I'm flashing my lights. And his parents are like, no, we're here. We don't see any lights. What do you mean you don't see any lights? So after some time of doing that, both Brandon and his parents became increasingly frustrated, and angry shouts of don't you see me came from Brandon's end of the phone call. Fed up, Brandon simply hung up on his parents. Now Annette, obviously as a mom, with a calmer head, would immediately call her son back and just apologized. It was then that Brandon said he would simply walk towards some lights he saw off in the distance. These lights, Brandon believed belonged to the town of Lind. There, it was Brandon's plan to find his friend's house. So Brian, Brandon's dad, drove his wife back home and dropped her off. Then he once again continued out into the night trying to find his son. As Brian headed off toward Lind, again around 2:30 a.m., he stayed in contact with his son via phone call. It was about now that Brandon suggested he meet his dad in the parking lot of a nightclub in Lind. To get to this nightclub, Brandon told his father that he was going to cut across a field as a shortcut. With every step Brandon took.
So he's like, sure, the town's right here. He's just guessing he's next to a town of Lind. Like,
when you say guessing, his parents say he was confident. Right. He was certain he was near the town of Lind.
And I was going to get there. Like, you went a track through corn. What kind of field?
Well, it's Minnesota. I don't know what they grow up there. There are cattle fields, though. I think these are cattle.
The wheat.
I wouldn't call them ranches. I'd call them farms. Yeah. They're cattle farms.
Yeah. So he's going to track through this farmland to these lights, the city that he thinks is Lind. Lind.
Mm-hmm.
And meet, because he knows the town of Lind, and meet his dad at this nightclub. Okay.
Which kind of makes me laugh that he and his dad are like, you know this place? I don't know this place.
I know, that's where my mind went. It was like, is
what
this a
kind
strip
of
club? And he's like, Dad, I know you know where this is.
He's like, I'm going to drop your mom off.
I know
first.
right where it is too. Yeah. He's like, hold
on,
let me drop your mom off.
But now I'm starting to piece things together. Now, with every step Brandon took, Brian could hear the sounds of his son's movements on the other end of the call. Then he heard his son say, "Oh, shit." After this exclamation, the call remained open for a short while, but there was absolutely no sound coming from Brandon's end of the call. And then the call simply ended. Now, Brian tried calling his son again, over and over, but no one ever answered those calls. That night, or I guess early morning, Brian wasn't going to go home and just wait till daylight to search for his son. So he and Annette, along with some of Brandon's friends, searched the rural areas all along those gravel roads, but it was to no avail. The next morning at around 6:30 a.m., Annette called the Lind Police Department to report her son missing. The officer who took the call seemed incredibly skeptical and told Annette that her adult son had every right to go out for a fun night and not come home when his parents had expected him to.
Why does that seem to be such a reoccurring cop out?
All right.
Is that why they name it cop out? Because cops have the best out?
I have no idea.
Like, it has to
my
be.
problem.
How stupid.
You
Like,
know
we
those,
just
like,
told you what happened. Our son clearly wanted us to pick him up. Let's use a little common sense here in your
Yes.
brain
I
and be
agree.
like, I can't go for the cop out because everything they're saying absolutely points to something fishy has happened.
See, and I literally was going to have that unpopular opinion where I was like, if every police department took every one of these missing person calls seriously, we wouldn't have enough police officers to respond to them all. But I think the difference here is literally that he was on a call asking for help and he just disappeared. Like that, if he wanted to just be gone and enjoy his night, he's not going to call his parents and then have himself a party with some cows in a field.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
And there's so many times it feels like it anyway, that there's like this disproportionate amount of stories where in small towns you're hearing the cops say the same things. And maybe, yes, it's because of their experience, like, oh, the person just ends up like coming back and whatnot. But it's always the story where like this, where like parents are telling them like, no, like we were just in contact.
Right.
Like, when it like this doesn't make sense. Like, what kid just calls their parents and just gone?
And I think like the most rational response would be not assuming that something malicious happened to him, but that he had an accident and that he's injured somewhere in one of these fields.
Yeah.
And he might need medical attention. So let's not, draw out the missing person detectives right away, but let's call in the fire department or a search party or whatever.
Yeah, he's in trouble somehow.
Well, the police seemed to think that Brandon was fine and was simply off just being an independent college kid. Now, despite this attitude, officers did eventually get involved in the search for Brandon, and pretty quickly they were able to use Brandon's cell phone records to triangulate where his phone was the last time it connected to a cell tower.
How long after is this?
I don't
They
actually
were
know.
like, all right.
I don't know.
It was probably like their 48-hour, like,
but it
or
probably
whatever
wasn't
needs to
soon
go by.
enough to actually do anything helpful. Now, what they discovered was very, very surprising to Brandon's parents. Now, Brandon had been certain when speaking to his parents that he knew exactly where he was. But when his location was revealed, he actually was near another town altogether called Porter. And this Porter was 20 miles from where he thought he had been. It was near Porter where officers began their search for this missing Brandon.
Sorry, I was still thinking about some other things. What brought him to Porter?
So they checked his cell phone records, and the last time it connected to a cell tower, that cell tower was near Porter.
Did you see like how, like what time that was compared to when his dad said he had last talked to him?
No. But here's what's crazy to me is you hear 20 miles and you're like, this isn't far at all.
No, that's hella far.
20 miles is ridiculously far.
The way I think of it is, so I'm thinking of this story and most stories you tell us, I'm like, I put it in my location. This one fits perfectly because we got a town about 35 miles away from us called Greeley. There's a college there. It's a college town. It's also a farm town. All the land in between there and where we're at is farm country. So I'm like picturing this exactly, like I could see these rows he's on and everything.
20
miles
and not realize
20 miles either direction brings you past Fort Collins into
Correct.
Denver and then way east. Like, I mean, you're starting to get to Fort Morgan at that point.
Yeah.
Like, if you picture it that way, it is a very
it's
like, especially
crazy.
walking. How long you should
know.
know.
Wait. Quickly, officers located Brandon's green Lumina sedan. There were no keys left in the vehicle, and there were no signs of foul play inside or around the car. Brandon's car was stuck in a ditch along Lyon Lincoln Road between the towns of Porter and Taunton, meaning he didn't walk to Porter from being where he thought he was. When he called his parents, he was close to Porter, and he was 20 miles off of his location. So he goes into the ditch. He's in Porter. He calls his parents for a ride, convinced he's 20 miles away. That's what's bonkers to me, which is, I didn't add this, but I'm going to say it right now. It was aliens.
As soon as he gave
there
me a few.
was nothing about aliens.
Just a few details.
Until we've gone into this where I'm just like, wait.
Or I'm going to go Detective Jason on us. Drugs.
Okay. We're going to get back to the story. I apologize this, but the Resident Alien episode where she's like trying to drop him in the bed and she drops him and they're like, well, at least you got him in the house. I just pictured that alien lifting up his Lumina and dropping it 20 miles away. Well, at least you got it in Minnesota. But we have to continue.
So you're speculating that he had one of those experiences where you stop,
Correct.
you get stuck, get picked up, and the alien's like, all right, we got to put him back and it's like a new alien. Like, hey, this is
it's a newbie.
Like this is your first test. And then it's supposed to drop him right where he was, but he missed by. But when you're in the air high up, like 20 miles isn't that far. Funny. I was wondering when you'd bring up that show.
Back to the real story.
It's our new favorite show.
Now, the search that commenced after finding the vehicle involved police dogs, air surveillance, and hundreds of volunteers. A canine unit was even brought in an effort to locate Brandon. A scent was picked up by one of the dogs, and the scent led searchers to the Yellow Medicine River. It was here, at the river, that the scent completely stopped. What was curious was that there was no evidence seen or items discovered along the path between the car and the river where the scent disappeared. Now,
so he walked to the river.
But you think there would be some sign that he had been there?
Yeah, especially if you're like drunk or drugged.
Yeah. Now I'm going to wait. You have to wait to speculate.
I'm like, I lost this, and this, and I know I had this at this time. Like all three things are gone now. I never have those pictures again.
You have to wait to speculate on the river situation because I want to give you all the evidence first.
Right.
Now, the scent to the river was not the only scent picked up by a canine unit. In fact, Brandon's scent was located on a piece of farming equipment in the area where Brandon had gone missing. When investigators spoke to the farmer who owned that piece of farm equipment,
what was the equipment?
The farmer refused to let the investigators search his property.
Oh, really?
Yes. Now, this refusal by the farmer was a sign of other issues to come. This area where Brandon went missing is filled with various farms, including cattle farms, and most of the farmers were unwilling to allow their property to be searched. And since law enforcement lacked significant probable cause, they could not attain search warrants, leaving multiple swaths of land in the search area that were simply off limits.
Marijuana.
See, I have another theory in mind.
But go ahead. Oh, I'll open up on that a little later. But
now, the first theory developed based on the initial scent trail picked up by the canine unit was that Brandon had simply fallen into the river and he either drowned or had fallen into the river, climbed his way out, but then due to the cold temperatures, it was just under 40 degrees that night, Brandon succumbed to hypothermia and died.
Okay. How big is this river? It's not the Mississippi, right?
No.
So let's search the river.
Well, they do several times. And that's one of the major issues with the river theory. And I'll tell you that in like 2021 or 2022, that entire river dried up.
Oh my gosh.
And they excavated the entire thing and there was no remains found. Spoiler alert. Now, if Brandon had drowned...
Also, if you're in this area, don't hide bodies in that river.
The question would be, where did the body go? Surely someone would have found it by now. Next, if he had died of hypothermia somewhere in the area, then surely one of the cadaver dogs used during the course of the search would have located Brandon's decomposing body.
Yeah.
There were also no sounds of water heard on Brian's end of the call. So how is that Brandon, oh my gosh,
There we go. I told you.
Brian is the dad.
Long names will happen.
I know. People will tell you on the YouTubes. Brian's end of the call is the dad. So how is it that Brandon exclaims, "Oh shit," then falls into a river without any sound of water coming across to his father? Correct.
Plus, as you're going towards the river, if it's a decent flowing river, that's loud. It is loud.
He did say, like, his dad was asking him, like, what do you hear? What do you see? And he goes, I see fields. I see lights. I hear water by. However, if he's falling into a river, there's going to be a sound of that on the phone. A sound of the phone dropping. His dad would have heard.
Or if he's that
water.
Close to a river while talking to his dad, I would think his dad would also hear it.
Yes. Correct.
2008. Brian, the dad.
Yes. I want to be very, very clear. We don't need a Patsy Patty situation on our hands.
I can't blame you at all because I can't keep any names straight. And I know, you've been looking at it a whole lot longer than me, but there's a lot of names in these stories. So I don't blame you. Okay. So Brian, even in 2008, they're on phones together. Phones are good at that point. Like at least like reception. You know, if you're getting reception, it's not. I know it is the age of "Can you hear me now?" But again, that was a little bit before that. So phones had stepped up to the point that like you are hearing a clear signal. Yeah, that was their only goal. It wasn't like internet and stuff at that point. Can you hear me now? Remember those?
Yes. Now, in addition to the 2 previous scent trails I mentioned, there was a third trail discovered. One of the tracking dogs followed Brandon's scent from his car along a gravel track toward an abandoned farm, leaving some people to question which scent trail should be considered as the path Brandon traveled that night away from his car. And before you ask, no, I never found anything out about whether or not this abandoned farmhouse was ever searched.
Oh, man.
There's a lot of unanswered questions, and there's something I'm going to reveal at the end that I think maybe helps us understand why there's so little true details.
Well, right now, where we're at, there's a lot of just odd things. From the very beginning, you mentioned it, and it was I thought an odd thing, but at the same time not like questionable that parents had anything to do with it. But just like I couldn't imagine us going to look for our son, no matter what their age is, and not being able to find him, and then me being like, "Well, let me take you back so you can go to sleep."
See, and I don't think that was the plan. I think the plan was, hey, he's a 10-minute drive from the house, which maybe walking is an hour, right? It's not long.
You wouldn't let me take you back.
I wouldn't, but I think they might have said like, hey, why don't you go home? What if he's headed towards the lights of our town and he thinks it's Lind? You be home just in case he walks home.
You still, no.
Why
well, he'll get on the phone and call us from there. No, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of weird. And then you had said, oh yeah, in a humorous way, but maybe the real thing. It's a nightclub. Maybe it was a gentleman's nightclub. And then, everything from the 20 miles off from where he said 20 miles is a lot, especially in farm country. But at the same time, if you're under the influence, I wouldn't say if from what his friends say, like, oh yeah, he was okay.
No, he clearly, I think, drove his car into a ditch. He had enough to drink that he should have been concerned.
And when you had said that, one of my first thoughts is, I think any of us have been at that college age and like just getting crazy. Mm-hmm. You think you're good and you also act good until a certain point. I've been told, like I'll ask questions from the night before and they'll be like, dude, you didn't seem messed up at all.
That is a complete and total lie.
I've said
maybe when you were younger.
At that age, not the age I am now. No, it shows now, but no, but at that age, I don't know. Certain people also just have a little bit more stamina, and I personally,
he's a small guy, 5'6".
It doesn't matter. It actually size doesn't matter. So I think if there was drugs involved, he could definitely,
Well,
consume
nobody
a little.
was saying he was doing drugs. So
I
we're
know,
not going to
but you
say
don't
that.
know.
Okay.
Plus,
I think
there's all
you
these-
would know.
There's these farm fields
2008
around
Minnesota.
that don't let them get
All right.
in. So they're growing weed. That's why. And they're
Or
sending weed to the college town.
This isn't something we're going to talk about. I would think it's more likely that this kid wandered onto a farmer's land. The farmer got nervous, had a shotgun, wound up shooting him, disposed of his body, and all of the farmers around him who've known him for 4,000 years were like, nope, we got your back, Jack. They're not going to search any of our land.
But you said it's kind of common for a lot of, or was it just this time they asked farmers and every time?
they would have to. It was this time.
Just this time. Okay.
But they brought in this special like search
That's
support,
I
whatever.
like that. Yeah.
And the guy said it makes sense. They've got all these cattle. They don't want us disturbing. Like this is their livelihood. You could also understand one farmer saying, no, this is how I feed my family. If you come in messing it up, like you could ruin my income for a year. Like you cannot come in and like dig up ground. You just can't. And they all probably were like, okay, we'll all stand in solidarity. So one of us isn't pointed out. I could see that too. But there are other theories. And these theories involve Brandon possibly having a mental break or Brandon possibly committing suicide. But his family and friends were adamant when they said that he had no history of mental illness and in general, he was very healthy. And they questioned if he intended to commit suicide, why would he call his friends and then his parents ask him for a ride? Now, I see you shaking your head. So we're both dismissive of those ideas.
It's exactly how he said it was.
Yeah.
He just had the location wrong. And while it is afar off, when you're in farm country, go the wrong way.
Yeah.
You can end up 20 miles. He's trying to get 35
somewhat intoxicated,
miles.
You easily could wind up in a completely different place.
And why I said marijuana is like, you're just in your own world, like thinking you're doing everything right, listening to music, you're feeling good. And then
we just need to clarify that there are no sources saying that Brandon ever participated in the use of marijuana. Now,
I'm just throwing it out there.
There was something Brandon had that he would have to physically deal with. And that was that Brandon was legally blind in his left eye due to an injury that he had sustained during childhood.
Jeez.
This condition resulted in Brandon having to deal with depth perception issues. And to mitigate this, Brandon had to wear glasses. When officers searched Brandon's car, they discovered that pair of glasses, meaning that when Brandon headed off into the darkness during the early hours that morning, he did so with some likelihood that he might struggle telling how far or close things were in front of him. Now, in addition to farmland and farm equipment and gravel roads, there is something else that's relatively common in this area that might have posed a threat to Brandon. And these are, which I don't know if you've ever heard of them, underground cisterns. Do you know what a cistern is?
Like holds water, right?
So an underground cistern is used to collect and store water, or I should say liquid. It can store all kinds of liquid.
Right.
What if Brandon, struggling with depth perception, fell into one of these cisterns?
Oh.
Now, you can look these up on the internet, and there are a variety of types, some which seem plausible that a person could fall into them and under the influence might not be able to get themselves out.
Literally, my first thought when you were telling us about the moments leading to him saying, oh shit. Of course, I'm like going conspiracy with everything, or like who's killing who's kidnapping him or killing him. But I also try and reserve a little like what's just the possibility that like natural circumstances happen and there was no foul play. And I put myself here, and we have obviously you go a little bit west from us, we have a lot of mountains and stuff. You can fall off a cliff pretty easy. That's what I thought of, was that oh shit moment is like you made the wrong step and you realize it in like this split second and you have time to say, oh shit. Like and then it's done. And a cistern. So can you explain? So you looked them up.
Yeah, there are a variety
Especially,
of
like,
cisterns.
because
The ones I would be concerned about, not so much ones that have come about in the 20th or the 21st century, but there are some 19th century cisterns that legit are like a hole in the ground.
That's what
and then just this giant basin where water can accumulate. And I mean, if you fall in there and you're disoriented and you're trying to get out, unless you're right below that like hole.
So is it like a hole that goes into kind of a bowl shaped, or not bowl, but what would you call like a pot?
I saw ones that were like this.
Yeah.
So there's
what would you call that? It's like I don't know, a vase shape. Like it's got a small hole and then it goes out. That's what I was picturing. So I wanted to see if that's actually. They have discovered
some like 19th century ones that look
and
exactly like that.
They just stay open. There's nothing covering it.
Well, there should be something covering it.
But that doesn't mean there is.
But that doesn't mean there is.
So that explains that, because also I was like, well, in Minnesota farmland, I'm not really picturing like just cliffs.
Right.
Where you're just dropping to your death.
I've got a couple thoughts, but we're going to get to the end because I've got something else for you.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Now, since Brandon went missing in 2008, there have been several searches that have taken place and that still take place depending on what leads come in. Now, the Swanson, Brandon's parents, did help with the passing of Brandon's law in Minnesota. This law requires, quote, law enforcement to immediately begin a preliminary investigation when an adult goes missing under dangerous circumstances, regardless of their age, end quote.
That came from
So some positive things have come out.
Because they're like, you can't use the cop-out anymore.
Right. But I'm not quite ready to wrap this up. Because as I was working through the research and the writing, there was one name that I could not get out of my head, and that was Israel Keyes. Now, for those of you who do not know about Israel Keyes, a quick rundown on who he was is he was a self-professed serial killer who seems to have taken the art of going undetected to another level through a meticulously planned series of trips, buried kill buckets, flights, and rented cars. And according to him, we won't know if he killed someone unless he tells us, which he cannot do now because after being caught for his final crime, he took his own life to prevent details of his crimes coming out and being told to his daughter. Now, I found a map online that has one of Israel Keyes' kill buckets being found on the state boundary between Minnesota and South Dakota. And like Israel said, unless he tells us he killed somebody, we will never know.
So that kill bucket that they found, he told his daughter about.
No.
Or he told
So
them
during
about.
his once he was caught, he had a bunch of FBI guys trying to get him to admit to these crimes. And he revealed the location of certain things. He admitted to committing a few crimes. And I'm assuming that's how they know this is one of his kill buckets. But what a gift for Israel Keyes. You fly to Minnesota, you bury a kill bucket, you're driving home trying to stay undetected on these back roads. And some slightly inebriated college student stumbles out in front of your car. It's all speculative. But I will tell you this.
At the same time, too?
The kill bucket would have been buried prior.
Around like 2000, but 2008, right?
I don't think he says when it was buried.
When did Israel Keyes do his last? When did he kill himself? After. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And there's one more thing.
I remember you talking about Israel
I know. We're going to talk about him one day.
We haven't covered him yet.
Brandon Swanson's disappearance is listed by the FBI in VICAP, which stands for Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. So my question is, what might they know that hasn't been released to the public?
Say that one more time. I want to.
Okay.
VICAP.
So VICAP is where you can put crimes where, like, if a crime is committed, somebody can go in and look for similar details in VICAP.
Mm-hmm.
But it's for violent crimes. It's to help catch violent criminals. And when you think about it, where is his phone? Why haven't they found his phone? If they have searched the areas, if the farmers who say you can't search, but I'll look on my property.
His case is
listed.
Of this.
Yes.
It's listed in there.
So to me, this is all speculation.
So they don't actually.
What if they found his phone and it was completely destroyed?
So these
and so
these
they
small
go, there
town
has
cops
to be something
saying
else.
that he fell in a river.
Oftentimes things are kept.
It's not actually the case. Like,
I
at
don't
least
know.
the FBI doesn't agree with them. The FBI is like,
And I want to know, have they never found his cell phone? How have they never found his cell phone? Like, why has it not surfaced? Because his parents were still able to make calls. Officers were still able to make calls on it the next day.
well, I'll tell you why.
Aliens.
And you mentioned it earlier. Aliens.
I like Israel keys.
I like your Israel
think
keys.
In a cistern. I don't even know. This story.
But the cistern also is crazy because also the farmers wouldn't let them on the land to check everything. I mean, it literally could be weird fucking case of the girl at that hotel in California. What was it called? Cecil Hotel.
Yeah.
And
that was one thing I thought about. Why are these bodies random?
Like in water.
Possibly disappearing
like
in water.
Bins.
Yeah, I don't know. So
maybe that's an alien thing, though.
They dispose of them in water.
They're like, whoops, we went too far on this one. Where do we put this? In a body of water. The ocean? No, we have too many of our cousins down there in the ocean.
As octopuses.
Let's just drop it. Oh, there's a big one. We'll put in there. They'll have no idea.
Here's why. So I meant to mention this when we were talking about the river theory. Just today, maybe today or yesterday, a college student who had been missing since early March, his body was found in a river. So I do think maybe drunk college kids fall into bodies of water, but their bodies are found.
Yeah.
So we're basically limited to, it's in a cistern, he was abducted by aliens, or a serial killer.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
if
think
it's
there's
not a
another
river
option.
where there's alligators.
Or he pissed off a farmer and the farmers are all...
Well,
farmers are thicker than
I think
FBI
that farmer,
agents.
I think the cistern.
I said it and then I wanted to take every word of it back. But if it gets farmers to listen to us,
farmers got thick skin and they probably do stand together. I would think anyway. There's so few of them nowadays. There's not like there's this crazy competition between all of them.
They just shout skull and they know what it means.
Yeah.
In Minnesota. You betcha.
Yeah. If you know, you know. So the cistern and the a farmer shot him because just like, get the fuck off my land, or just thought like it was like, I don't know, they're just paranoid about something. They're like, Monsanto agent, I'm gonna kill you.
Oh. What is that?
Taking my seed.
Yeah.
Not his sperm, but if you know about Monsanto. Am I saying that right?
We cannot say thick farmer and then talk about their sperm. It's just not okay.
No, we probably shouldn't. Am I saying that right though? Monsanto?
I don't think so.
Anyway, it's that GMO seed that they're making farmers use, and there's very few farmers left that can use natural seeds now. So farmers are,
which we should cover at some point.
Yeah.
The more you know.
And that's why I left a little like between true crime and conspiracy. There is this weird area where you just cover some things that you're just like, this isn't right.
It should not be happening, but it is.
So yeah, I could see I think there's two cases we could see farmers being involved in. Like if a farmer did actually kill him and he just, called up all the homeboys around. It's like,
I made a mistake.
But cops are going to be around.
I need you all to stand shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
Hoe to hoe.
Yeah. But yeah. And they probably like, we hate what's like, they probably think the whole city world is crashing in on them anyway. So they're like, what's it matter if a city boy gets killed? But
there's no answer. So we can
serial
just
killers interesting. Aliens interesting. I mean, if I'm going to lean towards anything,
Cistern. All right.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, Brandon was an average American college student who did what most college students do. He went to a couple of parties with his friends to celebrate the end of the school year. And like most college students, when he was tired and ready to go home, he did so by making the best decision for how he felt in terms of driving. And like most college kids, when he found himself in a precarious situation, he called his parents for help. But for Brandon, these average college kid situations did not end how they normally do, or should. The ending for Brandon was tragic and unsettling and a complete and total mystery. A complete mystery for most everyone, I guess, except for maybe a farmer in the area unwilling to have his property searched. A killer like Israel Keys who got very, very lucky when Brandon crossed his path in the early hours of the morning. Or for one poor person one day who stumbles upon an unmaintained underground cistern with a horrifying secret.